Hello guys, welcome back to my channel. I'm Cheddar and today we were starting with a blank slate. Welcome to New Roots Zoo. While the space may look barren now, we're going to transform it into something magnificent. Without further ado, let's get right into the build. To begin, we'll be starting with the layout of the entrance. Later on, we'll be building the greater flamingo habitat. If you'd like to skip to that part of the video, the time posted will take you straight to the footage. Now, if you're choosing to stay, welcome to the fun part. For me, the beginning is always the most intimidating. I mean, it sets the foundation for the rest of the zoo. Now, before I started building, I found some inspo pics online just to give myself something to go off of. Normally, I would look for a zoo entrance, but I actually went with something a bit different. Rather than basing the entrance off of, well, a zoo entrance, I based it on the Heritage Museums and Gardens Welcome Center, which is located in Massachusetts. The photos on screen are the ones that I used for inspiration for this build. The developers GWWO Architects posted the project with a bunch of different angles, so I was able to easily base my design off of it, but later on, you'll see that I took my own artistic liberties as I went on. If you're ever in a creative slump, I highly recommend looking to the internet for some inspiration. Now, real quick, I'm going to be very transparent with y'all. I cut out quite a lot of footage from this build. I had around 6 hours to go through, and clearly I'm a very indecisive builder, so a large portion of the cuts are just from where I built something and scrapped it. Overall, this took me around a week to complete. I work full-time plus I'm in college, so I really just play when I can. Anyways, as you guys can see, I just finished the first building in our entrance. This will be the ticket area for our zoo. From here, I started on the Welcome Center. Later on, we'll build the foundation for the gift shop. These spaces will be completed in the next video. When I began, I only had 40k to start out with. This may sound like a lot, but it can very quickly dwindle. It was super risky for me to start out with the foundation of the entrance, but I'm ultimately glad I did. A large portion of players who want to build their own zoo in franchise mode normally leave space to build an entrance or choose not to build one at all. Of course, there is no right or wrong way to build your zoo. I will say I definitely chose the risky option by building my entrance first. Guests will only enter the zoo once you have a habitat or exhibit animals, so you won't make any money until then. Ultimately, I didn't want to have too much or not enough space for the entrance, so I just went ahead and built the foundation. If I went all out, I fear I wouldn't have any money left. The space that I'm currently building on screen is the gift shop. At this point, I already knew the style I was going for in the entrance, so it really didn't take me long to finish laying the foundation. Now, when watching other YouTube videos of other creators' builds, I get a bit confused about the layout of the area they're building in. To help y'all out, I created a little map of the entrance. I am clearly not an artist, but I hope this will help y'all understand the layout. I'll also do overhead shots of parts of the zoo as we build, so y'all can see the progress we're making. Ultimately, my goal for the zoo is to just go as far as my PC will allow me. Before I forget, I'd just like to say if there are any animals y'all'd like to see in this zoo, or if y'all have any ideas in general, please leave them below. Even if you have a critique, I'd love to hear it. I always want to grow. Now, y'all won't believe it, but it's finally time to start building the foundation for our flamingo habitat. The only rule I had made for myself is that I had to have a massive waterfall. I've never actually built one in-game, but I always see how they can elevate a build, so I had to do it. If you've been on my channel before, then you know I try to stay away from any animals that require water in their habitats because I despise terraforming, but I felt like it was time to face my fears head on. Like I said, I normally don't enjoy terraforming just because I'm not good at it. I did cut out a good bit of the terraforming so y'all wouldn't have to suffer. One thing I did learn while making this enclosure though is that rocks are my best friend. If the surface looks a little strange, just add some rocks and it will magically be fixed. If y'all have any tips on terraforming, please leave them down below in the comments. I would greatly appreciate it. Hopefully it would make the process a little bit easier for me. With that being said, let's get into why I chose greater flamingos for the first enclosure. Now, if you go to any zoo, one of the first animals you'll see will be the flamingos. They're cheap to take care of and are confident around guests. They can be around a high amount of visitors without any issues. For these greater flamingos to be happy, we need at least 10 to meet their group needs. The absolute bare minimum land needed for these little birds is 404 square meters, and the minimum water is 263 square meters. In the end, we ended up with 1,012 square meters of land and 355 square meters of water. So that means we can have up to 20 grown adults in this habitat at all times. I also left some space just in case we need to expand later on. As y'all can probably see, I had some issues figuring out the layout for this habitat and where to place the waterfall. I ended up placing it right against the shelter for the flamingos. I lost part of the footage for the waterfall, which if you've been on this channel, you'll know I constantly lose footage, so I guess just get used to it. No, I'm kidding, I'm so sorry. I'll get better at some point, but once the waterfall was in, everything really just fell into place. Overall, this space was just about trusting the process. I didn't quite see my vision until the waterfall was in. If you have an idea, just go for it. Your vision likely won't come to life until you're close to being finished or you are finished. I actually just realized that I haven't explained the zoo name yet. As I mentioned before, the name is New Roots Zoo. I recently moved across the country in the US to start fresh. I grew up in a small town and just moved to a big city. It's a new experience and I'm settling down. New roots. See what I did there? New roots? Anyways, that's why this zoo is called New Roots. Y'all let me know if you like the logo I made for our zoo. Now let me move on to explain what I'm doing at this point. I had already finished the foundation of the shelter, and I could finally finish lining up the custom barrier I made for the habitat. From there, I finally finished terraforming and permanently added in our water. I was so excited to finish up this last bit of terraforming. I could finally see the build coming to life. I also didn't have to touch that dreaded tool ever again, at least until I have to do a water feature again. It's okay, I'll be fine. I actually think I'm getting a lot better at it. Now, remember how earlier I said rocks were my best friend? Boy, was I right. I mean, look at how much they transformed the space. They perfectly covered up my questionable terraforming. I'm sure we're all thankful for that. I will definitely say they ate up my money, but you know, it was worth it. After I placed probably 1 million rocks, I added in just a basic fence in the corner of the back of our habitat. This will be covered by trees and foliage later, so it really won't matter what it looks like in the long run. Once I knew the flamingos couldn't escape, I began working on the walls inside the shelter. As you can see, a bunch of rocks from the waterfall were peeking through the wall. I wanted the greater flamingos to have as much space as possible in the shelter, so I just moved the walls back as much as I could without them clipping. Doing this also just made the shelter feel a lot more open. At this point, it's almost time to bring in our greater flamingos. To finish off, I moved our zoo entrances to their proper home and made a temporary space for our guest spawners. The zoo entrances actually generate power, so it was important to have them near the future staff facilities. Speaking of, we needed some facilities before we brought in our greater flamingos. To start off, I normally buy a trade center, keeper hut, staff room, and a quarantine. I would normally also buy a research center, but I've already completed the research for greater flamingos in another zoo, so it wasn't necessary. Now, with all that being said, it's time to bring in some of our greater flamingos. For now, I only bought a few to start off with, but we'll definitely be getting more very soon. As I said earlier, we'll need at least 10 greater flamingos in this habitat to meet their group needs, but I can only buy so many from the trade center at a time. Now that we finally have some animals, guests are arriving at New Roots Zoo. While we may be officially open to guests, we still have a lot to do. Our habitat still does not have any foliage, and our shelter is not quite a shelter just yet. It doesn't even have a roof. Before we get started on finishing our habitat, we still need to address our money issue. As you can see, we aren't making any profit. Luckily for us, I do have a solution. Our ticket area is currently bare and begging to be used. To raise our profits, I added in 2 information centers just to get us started. Now that we're finally making some money, we can finally work on making this enclosure suitable for our greater flamingos. I always start out with the terrain distribution just because it's the easiest for me. Doing so helps me plan out exactly where I want my foliage to go. These guys need minimum foliage, so I was quite limited with what I could do. Luckily, I didn't need to fill in too much space, so I personally didn't have any issues. Of course, when building a habitat, you can always add extra foliage. The animals just won't be too happy about it. Speaking of being happy, these flamingos were definitely happy about this waterfall. They were climbing all over the rocks and I absolutely loved it. I also went ahead and added in some enrichment items just to up their happiness as well. For this space, all I had to do was just add in minimum foliage and some enrichment items and it came to life. After the outdoor space was completed, it was time to move on to the shelter. The greater flamingos only have one food enrichment item, which is the forage pool. I tried to put it outside, but it just wouldn't fit in the space. To solve this issue, I added on a room to the back of the building. My only concern is that this single forage pool did not fill their food enrichment need. Later on, I may expand their habitat so they not only have more space, but we can add more flamingos and an extra forage pool. If y'all think this is a good idea, let me know down in the comments. Once I got this forage pool in, I could finally start on the roof. I went with the same vibe as the entrance so that everything could match. This was probably the easiest part of the build for me, just because everything suddenly clicked into place. I already knew what I wanted to do, so I didn't have to go back and forth trying to figure out if I should do this or this or this. It just was way more simple once I got to this point. I think my favorite part of this build is the skylight that's over the forage pool. Later on, y'all will see how the light cascading down onto the forage pool just brings the space to life. Once I got to the center of the building, I realized just how boring the stained wood was. To elevate the build, I swapped out part of the stained wood by the waterfall for the Indonesian temple brick. This logically just makes more sense as well. The wood would likely break down more quickly if it were near the waterfall. It also just looks 10 times better and breaks up the monotony of the wood. Now very quickly, I want to say if you've made it this far, be sure to hit the like button. It helps me reach others that enjoy my content just as much as you do. And while you're down there, be sure to subscribe if you haven't already so you're able to keep up with new Roots Do. Wow, my shameless plug took us right to this beautiful transition. I love that the shelter is eye-catching yet doesn't draw focus away from the animals. Once our roof of the shelter was complete, I began with the inside. I started off by covering up these rocks and just hid them behind some stained wood panels. It definitely took me longer than I expected, but I definitely enjoy how it looks in the end. I would normally recommend doing the inside of a building before, building the roof. I had to constantly shift my camera so that it wouldn't clip with said roof, and it just got super annoying. Moral of the story, do as I say, not as I do. After this was completed, I started on the indoor pens for the greater flamingos. The idea was that they could come in here at night and rest in the pens. I also thought it would be great for if an animal were hypothetically injured, the keepers could put the animal in here to monitor them. Of course, this wouldn't exactly happen in the game, but it's always nice to pretend. From here, I started on the backstage area. I made these custom counters to put along one of the walls. I then added in these custom shelves I made a while back. I'm honestly not satisfied with the interior of this building, so I will likely modify it at some point throughout this journey. Of course, if I make any modifications, I will definitely show y'all later on. Speaking of modifications, I fear I made a few too many. While I was building, I suddenly kept getting an insufficient funds message. I kept asking myself, why aren't we making money? I have income from shops, I have these animals. I just started deleting random items I didn't need in an attempt to raise our funds so I could finish our shelter. After frantically looking through our finances, I realized we were missing donation bins. These bins are a key way to make money in franchise mode. They may be an eyesore, but they rake in cash like no one's business. Once I got these bins in, we were finally raking in some cash. With this money, I put the final touches on this habitat. I added in some foliage, rocks lining the path, and some custom habitat boards I made. With that being said, I think it's finally time to take a look at everything we've created today. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you've made it this far, be sure to hit the like button. If you'd like to keep up with New Root Zoo, subscribe so you don't miss it. In our next episode, we'll be completing our entrance and adding a surprise to our zoo. Alright, I'll see y'all in the next one. Bye guys.